what pissed me off the most is that when I would talk about that story, the response and the anger was never like, well, shoot, like, why is a mortgage broker sending all of their clients to the same company when they're supposed to be shopping around? Like, and it's bizarre how much people defended that practice. Welcome to the Real Estate Replay, the podcast that says what everyone else in the real estate industry is too scared to say out loud. I'm your host, Wendy Gilch, and this season we're tackling real issues impacting home buyers and sellers. You know, the ones most real estate companies are too afraid to talk about. Hidden fees, we're exposing them. Shady practices, we're calling them out. And those broken parts of the industry, consider them on blast. Because while everyone else is playing it safe with their polished marketing and sanitized advice, we're here asking the questions that make people squirm. This is real talk for home buyers, home sellers, or anyone tired of being kept in the dark about how this game really works. The Real Estate Replay is brought to you by Housing Rebel because sometimes you need to break the rules to get it right. Let's get into it. So my guest today is Sam Koppelman, and he is a New York Times bestselling author who has written books with the former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. He helped build Fenway Strategies into one of the preeminent strategic communications firms in the country, with SideQuest speechwriting for Michael Bloomberg and running surrogate remarks operations on the Biden-Harris campaign, and co-founding Mayday, which is now one of the leading information providers on how to access reproductive health care in states with bans. Sam is published in the New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Times Magazine, and other outlets. He has a BA in government from Harvard, where he was named a John Harvard Scholar and wrote op-eds like Shut Down Harvard Football, which I can only guess how well that was received, and currently is in New York City as the publisher for Hunterbrook. So Sam, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I came across Hunterbrook 2 years ago, I think. Was it 2 years since the UWM?
About a year and a half ago.
Okay. And I remember reading this thinking like, these are my people. Like, I need to talk to these people. And I think I even sent an email because I have no shame saying something about like, hey, if you want to know where all the dirt's hidden in real estate, like, please, where do you need to go? I will point you in the right direction.
Oh, I wish I had received that email. Would have
saved I'm shameless. I've emailed Craig Newmark. I don't care. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, nobody responds. It's fine. So I'm so excited that you're here today because there are multiple stories in real estate that I think are important to talk about that don't seem to ever get enough attention. And I also think that some companies that you write about are phrasing and making your company, your Hunterbrook, look like it's got ulterior motives. And to me, that doesn't seem to be the case, in my opinion. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about some of the reports you've done and also talk about what Hunterbrook is and how it's not in bed with Rocket Mortgage. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but so just as an intro, if you could kind of tell everyone just what Hunterbrook is and what your mission is.
Hunterbrook is a company that produces investigative reporting, and it's a bet that investigative reporting has value and that the truth still matters. So the core of Hunterbrook is a newsroom where we've got incredible reporters and former intel analysts, people who are just really good at figuring out what's going on in the world. And they spend every day trying to identify the gaps between what companies say they're doing and what they're actually doing. And then the business model of Hunterbrook is that instead of monetizing the eyeballs that reporting can reach, because eyeballs can lead to all kinds of warped incentives like sensationalism and exaggeration, we monetize the truth itself, the impact of the reporting, our knowledge of what's going on in the world. And that means that Hunterbrook has an affiliated litigation business where Hunterbrook can turn stories where Hunterbrook identifies a company that has committed some kind of wrongdoing and is legally vulnerable. Hunterbrook can, the way that used to work is that ProPublica would write some story and it would lead to some multi-billion-dollar lawsuit and some law firm would make money and plaintiffs would get restitution and ProPublica would get nothing. And Hunterbrook's idea is, well, some of that money should actually be reinvested into the reporting. Hunterbrook also has an investment business that can take positions in the market based on our reporting. And then the really cool, radical thing we do that almost no companies do is we tell people exactly how we're monetizing or not monetizing every article. So when Hunterbrook publishes a story, we say, based on Hunterbrook Media's reporting, X, Y, and Z litigation has happened, or A, B, and C positions in the market have been taken by Hunterbrook Capital. And oftentimes we don't have any positions or litigation at all. It's just really good reporting that we're telling the world about. That's the mission of Hunterbrook. And one of the great things about it is because we're not chasing eyeballs, we don't have to cover the same Trump, Kardashian, Swift stories as everyone else. And we can spend real time digging into the weeds of stories that matter to people and communities around the country. There's stories impacting every single American who lives in a home. And so that's how we ended up on UWM and a few of these other stories that I'm excited to talk about with you today.
Yeah. And I think it's important. And I am like Midwest, middle income. And this year in one of my roles at the Policy Center, sometimes I get access to like reports created by investment companies that only are supposed to stay. I shouldn't say this because I don't think I was supposed to see them, but they're supposed to stay within their like client circle. And so I might be wrong on this, but I feel like with Hunterbrook, it's kind of nice because you're sharing this stuff that maybe a lot of general consumers wouldn't get. What is under the company hood, what's going on, and what could be potential positives or negatives. And we don't get that as a general consumer.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of great reporting is locked behind extremely expensive paywalls, some of which are even more expensive than you could imagine, the kinds of publications that charge $100,000 a year to read their report or their deep dive into a specific industry. And one of the commitments we've had at Hunterbrook is all of our reporting is published for free. And so a lot of in-depth information that takes months and months and months of us to put together is able to reach the public.
Yeah. And I love that you take on the very big companies, because I think for the smaller advocates like myself, I have a whole treasure trove of evidence and issues, but sometimes it's just not easy to find that right person to help you tackle that or back you up, because some of these
it's scary.
They have no shame to just like sue you into silence, and I think that it's important that you have all the arms to kind of be able to say what you want. And we probably won't get to it today, but I was reading your sausage casing report and I wanted to just vomit. Like I never want to eat sausage again, but B, like how horrible for a company to get that far along with that many violations and it just doesn't matter. Like just continue to exist.
Absolutely.
Do whatever they want.
That was an incredible story. We don't need to talk about it more on this housing podcast, but I encourage everybody who is listening to read our story on how the sausage is made, literally. We focused on this facility in Danville, Illinois, and found some absolutely horrific working conditions and environmental practices.
Health conditions.
And so definitely worth reading that one. But yes, we aren't afraid to take big swings as long as we have the truth on our side. And I think a very important thing about Hunterbrook is we're one of the only media outlets that still has a full-time fact checker, and every line in all of our articles are fact checked and they're all edited and they're all reviewed by lawyers. We always tell the truth. And that's a big part of the reason that over time, the credibility has been built and we've been able to effectuate a lot of real change.
Okay. So beyond big sausage, let's talk about your first report that came out, which was UWM. And I'm dying to know how that story came out, what it was about, which I like to call it the story of the 99 percenters, which we can get into. What was the response and were you surprised? Because was that your first housing one?
It was our first story period. And yes, we got a pitch early on that there was this company, UWM, biggest mortgage lender in the country, and that they sourced all of their mortgages from independent mortgage brokers. And all of the advertising around independent mortgage brokers is that they shop across dozens of options to try to find you the best loan with the best price for you. Yeah. And what we'd heard was that there were actually a lot of mortgage brokers who weren't independent, but were sending essentially all of their business to UWM. And what we love at Hunterbrook is a project where you can really dig into the data, find the actual answer. You're not relying on anonymous sources or conjecture. You're relying on fundamental facts. And so with this one, we realized we could build a database of all of the local deeds of trust filed with every mortgage, which has information on who was the mortgage broker and who was the lender. And we could match those with federal data on the prices of specific mortgages and other details about the structure of them. You could merge those databases. You could add in a bunch of other databases, GSEs, et cetera, and build a really good picture of housing in the United States. That was the baseline project we did. And what we found looking at these independent mortgage brokers is that there were actually thousands of them around the country.
It was like 8,000, right?
99% of their business to UWM, despite all of UWM's advertising continuing to say that they shopped for the best deal. So we published that story and immediately were able to reach a lot of people. UWM is now being sued by the Ohio Attorney General. It's involved in private litigation as well. And what's hopefully the best outcome of that story is that for the millions of people who read it and found out about it, if they see an ad for an independent mortgage broker, they walk into an independent mortgage broker's office, they're going to know to ask the question, are you actually shopping for the best deal?
Yeah.
Are you really basically just working for UWM?
Yeah, it's wild. That's what I call the 99 percenters. And what pissed me off the most is that when I would talk about that story, the response was like, oh, this must be like a competitor planted this story. The response and the anger was never like, well, shoot, like, why is a mortgage broker sending all of their clients to the same company when they're supposed to be shopping around? Like, and it's bizarre how much people defended that practice. And it's almost scary because now you look at some of the news and with the CFPB down and out, there are other companies that are putting out tools and marketing programs to kind of recreate that same thing. And so it's really important for consumers, especially home buyers, to understand, like, you can't just no longer in this industry work with someone and assume they have your best interests in mind. Unfortunately,
it's really scary for consumers, and there's no two ways about it. One of the most interesting things about that story was UWM loved to impugn Hunterbrook's motives. They said that I was working for Dan Gilbert. I've never interacted with Dan Gilbert.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to. Sounds like we could interview him about all kinds of things that Rocket might be doing wrong.
Right.
I'd be happy to talk to Dan Gilbert. But they impugned Hunterbrook, impugned our motives, but could never deny the core facts. And I think that speaks volumes that over a year and a half since we published that article, no one's provided evidence that these brokers are in fact shopping, or that UWM was never advertising.
Yeah. Or they did take some stuff down. They took a couple ads down.
Well, they deleted their Super Bowl ad. And, you know, have started being a bit more careful at the margin. But overall, I think a lot of bad actors in this country operate with what they think is impunity, because they think that the regulators are captured. They think the government isn't going to stop them. And I mean, at this point, I would worry about that. It's a reasonable thought. And there's a vacuum of accountability. And a big reason Hunterbrook exists is that we've tried to build a resilient model for fighting for that accountability in a way that is aligned with our mission and our incentives. And let's see what happens with UWM. It's been a year and a half, but you know, the moral arc of the universe is long. And I think, you know, there's a lot of cracks at the seams already, and we'll see what ultimately happens. But hopefully we already live in a world where more people know what they're getting when they're hiring an independent mortgage broker,
at least ask the right questions.
Mortgage. That's sure.
And I feel you when you say, like, you know, people give you, they're making up intentions, because even, you know, we put out a report about Zillow and all this stuff with the through the policy center, and it wasn't like in support of Zillow, but maybe in an action. And immediately the people on the other side were like, oh, I bet Zillow gave you money. I bet Zillow did this. And I finally had to write back to the one guy and be like, all right, asshole, here is the email I first ever sent to Zillow, which was to ask a question about for sale by owners, which was sent after our report came out. And then here is the response of the person I actually met after the report came out. Like, I have never talked to them, and I've never heard from that guy since. So I hope you enjoyed that.
I mean, one of the things about Hunterbrook, as I mentioned, is, You don't have to look for some hidden motive. We report the
Mhm.
truth. That's what our newsroom is doing. And then we tell you exactly how we stand to profit from a story, if we do stand
Right.
to profit from a story. And I do think that for a lot of people is refreshing, because in a
Mhm.
world where so much is corrupt and so much is broken and so many people are hiding the ball, it makes sense that people are thinking, oh, you must be paid by this person, or you must be an operator working on behalf of someone else, a sleeper agent. We just report the truth and we tell you exactly how we stand to benefit.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what we do at Housing Rebel. Like every writing has nothing to do with a single company, because
Hmm.
so many of the real estate publications that real estate agents subscribe to is 100% like, oh, I know who paid for that, or like, oh, I know who paid for that. And so it's nice to have outside independent voices who aren't swayed by any of that crap. All right. So let's go into story number 2, which came out this summer, which was absolutely horrifying. And it talked about 2 massive builders in the US, DR Horton and Lennar, and how they are completely underestimating not only what they should be spending when it comes to a warranty for the people that buy their homes, but the many, many, many issues in certain cities that these home buyers are facing after closing, including mold, plumbing issues, a variety of things. So, how did that story come about?
So there's these Facebook groups, 30,000 member Facebook groups of DR Horton and Lennar home buyers who are just describing all kinds of issues with their homes. And look, there's Facebook groups about a lot of things. Some of them we look through and decide there's no story there. Almost all of them we actually look through and decide there's no story there. But here we kept seeing specific complaints across the country, and specific people who just felt like their stories weren't being heard. Like there's these millions of people who live in these homes, and for some reason they weren't receiving coverage. So we dove in and interviewed, I don't know, more than 60 homeowners across the country. And these people were suffering from, defective homes and companies gaslighting them and refusing to help. And these people, I mean, the thing that was so sad was this was their dream. They were
Mhm.
finally going to get to own one of these homes. And then they move in, and suddenly what had been branded to them as, the central linchpin of the rest of their lives turns out to have structural issues and mold contamination. And they realize that they couldn't resell these, and they're driven to financial ruin. And the thing that made it a story for us, beyond a bunch of people who, were rightfully upset, was that it identified this corporate playbook that by design results in people moving into these homes that aren't what they expect, and then not being able to get the help that they need.
Yeah. Oh, it's almost like, to the builder, in my opinion, my personal opinion, it seems the builder, the consumer is just a product. We're done. See you later. But on the flip side, for that consumer, it's not like you sold them a defective watch. Like, you can't just return it.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can't walk away from it. Like, you are financially stuck. You can't just like change your mind and say, hey, take back my mortgage. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Like,
Totally.
it's so financially damaging. And it's wild that I even found that Facebook group. I love it. And I won't share what it was, because I think they want to keep it just for people that literally have issues and questions. But, from the people that you interviewed in your original House from Hell, Ashley, who had the Lennar home, I will give her TikTok handle if you want to see her videos. It's ASHTHORLOKI, is still fighting with Lennar. She still can't live in her home. It is still covered with mold. And for her, it's been at least over a year, 2 years, I don't remember. And she still has no resolution. I think at one point she's living with her parents. She's going to school. Like, she's trying, she did all the right things and just completely is stuck. And it's wild to me that with that much publicity, that many issues, I mean, you can see her videos. It's literally just covered in mold everywhere. And they just won't, she
It's
just wants to be
crazy, but
done.
it's an intentional playbook. I mean, they make these buyers sign contracts that attempt to indemnify these companies completely, ultimately provide people with less coverage than the implied warranties that are guaranteed to all homeowners by state laws. And so if you want to move into one of these home builders' homes, you're often waiving a lot of those rights. And what we found is that homeowners try to use the warranty that they're offered and they end up getting nothing. I mean, the most shocking case was there was a pregnant woman in Arizona who bought what she thought was this incredible home for her and her family. And there ended up being black mold in all the walls because of what she called shoddy construction. DR Horton refused to fix any of it, despite being under warranty months before her baby was supposed to be born. And she had to rush to the hospital and had 4 massive blood transfusions and an emergency C-section, which almost killed her. And also the baby. And they later found that the mold in her body was an exact match to what was in her walls. And this is the kind of stuff that's happening in these homes. And look, these companies are building a lot of homes, and I'm not against home building. I think we need way more homes in America, and we need home prices to be way more affordable.
Affordable homes, yes.
It cannot be a choice between building more homes and locking people in homes where their lives are ruined and they have no recourse whatsoever. And so, hopefully we're shedding light on some of these issues and creating more informed buyers. And more states are going to work to pass laws that don't allow these companies to circumvent basic warranty rights and
arbitration. Forced arbitration.
But forced arbitrations, I mean, study after study shows that the forced arbitration favors the home builder situations like this. And so there's basically no direct path to accountability that people have found, which again, like UWM, explains why these folks are acting with impunity. But we're not going to stop reporting on it.
And then a few other people, Patty, I forget which builder she had, still can't flush her toilet a year later. The one person in your report, I don't want to use her name, has gone like down the rabbit hole of compaction issues and has so much information about compaction issues and what's happening with these homes that she's gone all the way up through HUD. She has even tried to reach Ben Carson and nobody will get back to her, which is par for the course, but so damn frustrating. I think there was one more that might have been it. But I appreciate you talking about that with them. And have they responded to you, either one of those builders?
DR Horton gave us some kind of standard 1-paragraph response and didn't respond beyond that.
All right. Then your next story, which I find interesting that right after this came out, there was a lawsuit that was filed, was your report on LGI Homes and their tactics, which compared it to like a mattress company, which is actually people they hired from mattress companies.
Yeah, they hired
all these homes.
Sales companies.
Yeah. So what did you find with affordability, LGI Homes, and what they were telling home buyers?
So LGI was an interesting story because that also came from the same mortgage database we built on the UWM story. And that's been sort of like a fountain of story leads because we just have visibility into homes across the country. And so to anyone listening, like, please send us leads at ideas@hunterbrook.com. If you have some like supposition or guess about something happening in the housing sector, we may have the data to back it up. But we saw that in Florida, most builders and most homes saw the value go up. And DR Horton was the only builder in the country whose home values didn't just not go up by as much as everyone else, but actually actively went down in Florida. And so that made our spidey senses tingle a little bit. And what we found was that LGI is a fascinating company where their business model is to target renters, just inundate them with ads, leaflets at their door, Facebook ads that they spend millions of dollars on, and tell them why rent when you can buy. And they very aggressively market. They have super, in our view, predatory sales tactics. And they end up selling homes to people who can't afford them. And our mortgage database enabled us to figure out that LGI homeowners are foreclosing on their homes at 4 times the rate of FHA homeowners, which is already a high foreclosure group. And so we exposed this company. And I got to tell you, in the weeks since, the stories we've been hearing are even crazier. Stay tuned, but this is a company whose business model is to sell people a product that they wouldn't actually want if they knew what it really was.
Well, I think you even quoted the CEO as saying, like, we're not a builder, we're a marketing company or something crazy like that.
Yes. And one of the things that happened when interest rates went up and it became harder for home builders to sell their homes is a lot of other builders reduced their prices. And instead, LGI was like, oh, we're just going to spend more money on marketing. And so originally, instead of spending that money on the incentives, they just spent it on marketing. And then you can imagine what happens to the typical buyer. It's a less and less and less qualified buyer who's finally agreeing to your increased marketing spend. They've eventually reduced some of the prices of their homes because they've had to. I think that company is in a very precarious position.
And it's interesting. So after that report came out, not that they are related, but then DR Horton got sued for not being transparent with home buyers on what happens to your taxes after you close on a new home. So I don't know if you looked into that one yet.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. I've seen that suit. And I think there's going to be a lot more attention paid generally around the country to how homes are being marketed to people, where companies like LGI are putting on the leaflet $1,500 a month, but that assumes you're paying, 30% down, and it doesn't tell you about the taxes or HOA fees or any of the other factors that make living in the home expensive. And so I think the Horton suit and our LGI coverage and some of the other work in this space is going to slowly reveal what home buyers are really facing. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is a product of these companies that built so many homes over the past, 5-6 years, particularly during COVID when there was this boom. And suddenly they've got to sell all these homes. Selling them is harder than buying them, particularly selling them at a profit that sustains a business. And so I think you're seeing these home builders go to extreme lengths to, keep their shareholders happy at the expense of the home buyers who are the whole reason they exist in the first place.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be I don't know. I feel like consumers at this point have to rely on their states and private lawsuits to be able to be better protected, which is a little scary, because if you don't have the money for a lawyer, or your case isn't as sexy as a lawyer would like it to be, or maybe they have too many. We see it in real estate all the time.
Or you signed an arbitration agreement and indemnified the company because you didn't know, and you didn't hire a lawyer at the front end because you couldn't afford one. There's all kinds of reasons accountability is increasingly out of reach.
So what is next for Hunterbrook, and how can people find you?
What's next for us is some listeners from this podcast are going to send us some great story leads at ideas@hunterbrook.com. Annoyingly, it's Hunterbrook, but with no vowels is our website.
I know.
Whoever owns the real Hunterbrook.com will not talk to us. But HNTRBRK.com, ideas@HNTRBRK.com. Please write us. We love any ideas. And look, a lot of the time we look into something and there's not a story, because the truth is the only thing we care about. And if it turns out that the lead isn't what it seems like, we might not publish it, but we promise to always do a good faith effort of looking into whatever you send over. Would love any leads of any companies that are saying something and doing something else. And that's the bread and butter of what we do. And I'm so appreciative, Wendy, for all of your work and bringing attention to these issues and being one of the rare voices speaking up against wrongdoing in this space. So
yeah, it's a really, we get a lot of great emails when you have to speak up when companies don't like what you say. Speaking of, I have a really great tip for you on companies that are breaking FTC advertising laws and no one gives a shit. I'm talking like 30 companies, and I've talked to AGs, I've talked to state representatives, and it's like, oh, if you find me a victim, then we can talk about it. And I'm like, they're literally breaking laws. Here is all the evidence.
Well, Wendy, it sounds like you've got to write ideas@hunterbrook.com. I mean, this
I will.
Sounds like some good stuff.
I even have a presentation. I'll just send it to you.
Oh, awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories with us. And anytime you want to come back on, hopefully someone will plant some good stories for you and we can come back and destroy another awful thing a company was doing.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for this episode of the Real Estate Replay. But here's the thing. We know you have stories. The nightmare inspection that got swept under the rug, the agent who ghosted you at the worst possible moment, and the closing surprise that cost you thousands. Whatever shady, frustrating, or downright unbelievable thing that happened to you in the real estate world, we want to hear about it. Send us your stories at sellinglater.com, because the more we talk about what's really going on out there, the harder it gets for the industry to keep pretending that everything is absolutely fine. Until next time, stay sharp, ask questions, and don't let anyone tell you that's just how it's done. And if you're a provider in the industry who's totally over a bunch of the industry's BS, come join us at Housing Rebel. We'd love to have you. This has been the Real Estate Replay, brought to you by Housing Rebel by Selling Later. See you next time.